Well, now we're going to do the first in this series of videos, and I really wanted the first one to be a video about selecting materials and equipment, but some of you guys are getting ahead of me here, so I thought what I would do is move right into painting a burst, and then later on we can talk a little bit about equipment and materials. I'm going to go over it very, we'll say, sketchy right now. I'm using urethane paint, which is a solvent-based paint. I'm using candy colors because you'll notice if you see the guitar, it has a spectacular grain to it. So the last thing we're going to want to do is cover up that beautiful grain with an opaque color. So all the colors I use are transparent. I work basically as I recommend working, which is light color to dark. Now this acoustic is a Rickenbacker acoustic, and it's going to be painted in a scheme that we call antique fire glow or amber fire glow. And essentially what it's going to do is replicate a Rickenbacker fire glow paint job from back in the 1960s. So it's going to have a little bit more orange, a little bit more yellow, and a little bit more brown than, for instance, a new Rickenbacker would have to replicate the effect of it aging. And I'm also going to show you a little bit later how to amber the binding. In other words, pure white binding on an antique fire glow, brownish red guitar looks a little bit too brutal. So what we do is we put a little bit of amber on it to tone it down. But we don't spray that amber until we're actually done spraying the guitar and we're ready to do the clear coat. Okay, at this point I want to show you, we have a rotisserie here, and it's essentially just an upside down turntable fixed to the roof of the spray booth, and it allows me, using these two handles, to rotate the guitar without touching the guitar. Now there are other ways of painting a guitar like this. A lot of guys will use a horizontal rotisserie. Some people will actually hold it in their hands and try to paint it. To me, that's way too it's distracting because it takes a lot of muscle to hold that thing, and I would rather have the fine control of the gun that I get by not having to touch it. Now I can move in, out, spray, and not worry about muscling this thing around all the time. Now the gun I'm using is the gun that I've been recommending a lot in print on the various forums, and it's called a Sharp Finex, F-I-N-E-X, you can see it there. And the number is an FX3000. It's an HVLP gun. The nozzle on it is a 1.4 nozzle, which is medium to large size. You probably could paint car parts with it, although not a complete car. And essentially that's what it is. It's a car painting gun. We've got a number of controls on the gun, and these are kind of typical no matter what type of gun you use. This control at the top controls the spray pattern, how narrow or how wide it is. This control controls the needle, which is depressed by the trigger, and as a result it'll control the fluid or paint flow. And depending on how far in you turn it, less paint, how far out you turn it, it'll paint the side of a barn almost. Down at the bottom we have an air volume control, which is useful for special effects, but for painting straight patterns like we're going to do, I open it up all the way and it allows full volume of air. We'll talk about the compressor I'm using later. You'll notice I've got some quick change fittings which are helpful for maintenance. You'll also notice I have a 3M cup system on here, which is a quick change cup thing. This burst is going to be a 5-color burst. And remember, I said we're going to start out with a light color and move to the dark color. Next thing I want to point out is we've already masked off both the fretboard, which is, by the way, is bound, so we've got the fretboard binding masked, it's white celluloid, and masked off the side binding, which you see here, with a 3M thin line tape. However, the top binding and the famous Rickenbacker checkerboard is not masked off, because what we're going to end up doing with that is we're going to scrape it to get a nice clean line, which gives us a much cleaner line and more control than if we were to try to mask it off with tape and have it bleeding under the tape and end up having to scrape it anyway. You'll see as we get through this process that there will be a couple of spots, it's inevitable, where the paint will bleed under the tape. But all we have to do is take a razor blade and scrape it, and that cleans that up. I also want to point out we've masked off the area for the bridge. The bridge is slightly larger than this, but I want most of the area to have no paint, no sealer or anything on it, so the glue grabs really easily. We use a water-based glue, and if I were to glue over this sealed surface, it would pull up almost immediately from the tension of the strings when we glue the bridge on. Now the last thing I need to say, I should say, before I start painting is, note it has already been sealed. So you can see quite a bit of grain in here. You can see how the contrast in the grain has been bumped out. You might even be able to see a little bit of the flop in this real nice grain on this wood as I rotate it. You can't spray a good burst on a guitar unless it's been sealed. These are very thin colors, and if, for instance, I were to spray a piece of pine or something that hasn't been sealed, or even a piece of maple, it would take the color unevenly. So wherever the grain was less dense, you'd get a darker amount of color. Wherever it's more dense, it would resist the color, and you just have a mess on your hands. Whereas once this has been sealed with vinyl sealer, which is transparent, brings out the grain, as I said, and sanded nice and smooth, this is as smooth as a baby's butt. Once we've done that, then this essentially becomes a candy color, a tint that just goes on over the entire grain without any problems with absorption. Okay, normally when I'm painting, I will use a half-face respirator such as this. It has dust filters here to pull out any airborne dust that I might breathe. There's a one-way valve here that allows me to exhale but not inhale. You inhale through these. And these have NIOSH, N-I-O-S-H, which is a safety organization. These have NIOSH cartridges for organic vapor, which is what this urethane paint is. Now, I'm going to be spraying color without this, otherwise you wouldn't be able to hear me talk. I'd have to do a voiceover. We're going to try that out for the first couple of videos, see how that works. The background noise you're hearing right now, outside of the echo from my voice, is the fan, the exhaust fan. Typically when I spray, I have filters over on the wall that pull in the intake air, and then on the opposite side of the booth, I have a powerful fan, filthy powerful fan that exhausts all of the spray. Now if you look at the walls of the booth here, and the fan itself, you can see I did quite a bit of spraying here. This represents about 2 years worth of spraying and overspray in the booth. And because I only paint in this direction, this wall area gathers up all of the overspray, and then of course the fan sucks it out and pumps it outside. Use this type of respirator. Don't play around with dust masks. These are great if you're sanding. They do not do anything for organic vapor. So if you spray with one of these, especially if you don't have a booth like I do, you're spraying in a garage or a small room or even outdoors, you're going to get sick. This will take out the smell. And incidentally, if you could smell after you've got one of these on, it's either improperly fitted or the cartridges need replacement. They're good for about 6 months. They're activated charcoal. Okay, so I'm not putting this on, shame on me, and I'm going to get started spraying. Now I have a pattern that I use whenever I spray. It's a scheme. I spray all of my guitars, when I can, the same way. I will always start a burst or even a solid color or clear coats at this intersection between the neck and the body. I'll spray the sides down, and then I'll turn around. I'll spray the back and the front, sometimes in that order, sometimes in reverse order. But I always start here, and you'll see as I spray the type of a pattern or a scheme that I use. With solid colors or clear coats, it's especially important because by using this scheme and falling into the habit of doing the same pattern all the time, you'll know you have an even coat of clear or solid color on the guitar before you go back and put another coat on it. So if you just do scattershot painting, you're going to end up with more paint here than you do here, and maybe you won't even get this side. So always do a pattern in your head, some kind of a habitual thing. You'll also notice I have a balloon in there. That fills the hole so that paint doesn't enter the inside of the guitar, which should be raw wood. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to spray this entire guitar with an amber tint. to make it look older and kind of a little bit warmer, and to even out some of the grain that's on it. And when I spray the amber tint, I don't necessarily follow that pattern because I use a very wide spray pattern, as you can see. I'm going with 22 pounds of air at the regulator. I've got it all the way open here, and what I'm doing is I'm adjusting the pattern here and the amount of fluid or paint here. The aim is you want to control the gun, you do not want the gun to control you. If you have too much paint coming out, you're going to be rushing to get it done because you're afraid it's going to run. So the whole idea is just very little paint. When I do an amber coat, like I'm going to do, I do very, very light coats, continually rotating the guitar until it's evenly amber, all over every surface. Okay? So here we go. I'm going to first check the spray. I'm going to open it up a little bit here. And let's spray the front first so you can kind of get a feeling. I always work from the bottom up unless I'm doing my burst pattern, and I'll show you. So just kind of watch so I don't have to talk so much and won't take so much videotape. Here we go. You can see it getting ambered already. Now that's going to be a little bit darker than it dries, but you can already see if you compare that side with this side that you've got quite a bit of ambering just from a couple of light coats. Now I'm going to do this. You can see the amber going on. Not only does the amber go on, but it's really bringing out that wood grain. It's really bringing out. So now I'm going to do the neck, headstock, grab on a handle. We'll do the back of the neck. See the amber? It may be too subtle for this camera. I don't know. Maybe it'll, but I'm hoping it'll show up. It's certainly going to show up once we get around to spraying the burst colors. There goes the compressor.